The night after the typhoon, Kanda district looked like a throat half swallowed by darkness. All that kept it from closing were a few pinpricks of emerald light drifting through broken maple branches. From my workshop window I watched the scattered glow and felt the same hollow pressure every lantern maker feels when something is wrong with the colony. 3 evenings earlier, I had loaded nearly 700 bio-fireflies Hikari Mushi into the public lamps that hugged the Sumida embankment. Their glass bellies had pulsed so brightly that even the river, swollen with storm runoff, caught the color and carried it out to the bay. But tonight half the lamps were dead. Not dim, not flickering. Dead. Like jars with the lids twisted off. I buttoned my rain-bleached happy, slipped a coil of copper mesh into my pocket, and locked the workshop. The streets smelled of split cedar and composting soy. Families who still trusted their home lanterns padded along the wet stones, but most moved in anxious clusters, heads bent beneath paper parasols whose painted designs were almost invisible without full light. They nodded to me because everyone in Kanda knows the Komatsu line has kept the district lit since before the energy collapse. Before stepping onto the embankment, I tested one lamp. The crystalline lid was intact, the sugar pellets still wedged in the feeding ring, but the jar was empty. No husks, no wet smears. The insects had not died, they had vanished. "Same as last night, Akiyo-san," croaked an old fisherman from the arch of the bridge. His silhouette quivered above the water like a charcoal ghost. I sat here 2 hours and the lights winked out one by one, marching upriver. "Did you hear wings?" I asked. Even through rain, a colony on the move produced a faint hiss, as though someone drew a brush across silk. "Nothing," he said, "just the dark." I thanked him and moved on, unscrewing jars at random. Everyone had been opened with a tool delicate enough to avoid scratching the soft glass. It takes practice, and it takes guiltless fingers. Kids might have tried once, startled the insects and left fingerprints. Whoever did this knew the craft. When the portable clock at my belt struck the 10th hour, the typhoon's last cloud let go, and the moon squeezed through. The reflection revealed scratch marks on the railing, tiny straight grooves where something metallic had stuck and pivoted. A ladder hook, maybe. I ran my thumb over the marks until the sting of splintered oak reminded me to keep moving. On the 7th lamp, I found a thread. Silver, fine as spider floss, made from the same flexible alloy we use in the guild to weigh young fireflies before sale. That was when suspicion hardened into certainty. A lantern maker was stealing from her own. I returned to the workshop, my mind cutting through faces. Only 16 licensed glass wrights operated in the ward, and most bought their larvae from me. No one worked strictly at night except the orphan boy, Ren Shiratori, a fast talker who ground lenses for microscopes in his step-uncle's shed. Could he hypnotize an entire colony out of their lamps? Maybe. Could he sell them without the guild's brand? Difficult, but if someone had offered enough rice vouchers... I was still turning the question when a knock rattled the tin gate. I opened it to find Ren himself, soaked to the collar, clutching a softwood box. He did not smile. That alone sent alarm bells scampering across my spine, because Ren always smiled, even when one tooth was loose, even when his bills were not. "Akiyo-san," he whispered, "they took my sister." I'd pulled him inside. His story tumbled out between coughs. A man wearing a faded university uniform had arrived at Ren's shed before dusk, counted the hatchlings in his brood tank, and offered a month's worth of soybean bread for half. Ren refused. The man shrugged, drugged Ren with chlorochlorella vapor, and left with every last larva. When Ren woke, Benny, the little sister who should have been in her futon, was gone. All he left, Ren said, opening the box, was this. A single lamp rested inside, lids sealed. Against the curved glass floated 7 fireflies, each tagged with a drop of red wax on its hind segment. Wax marking is outlawed. The heat mutates the luciferase gene that makes Hikari Mushi glow. Their light dulls over weeks, until it vanishes entirely and the insect withers to a shell. You may as well slit the throat of a prayer. My hands clenched. Ren stared at the floorboards. His jacket read Tokushima Agricultural Institute. That campus closed 5 winters ago, but I heard rumors its lab stayed alive, hidden. They're breeding a new line, something that burns 3 times as bright. And 3 times as fast? I finished the thought for him. Plenty of smugglers dreamed of a super bright strain to sell to coastal defense towers. But the science was unstable. Push a glow too far and you extinguish it forever. You end up with a prettier corpse. He said they need feeders, Ren added. Young ones with universal blood markers. Benny's O positive. I met his eyes. Gold flecks shimmered in the irises, like the first spark a larva makes when it recognizes sugar. We'll get her, I said, and we'll reclaim the colony. I unrolled a district map. The lamps that had died formed an arc that pointed south toward the reclaimed marshlands on the border of Old Chiba. The ground there was pocked with half-collapsed factories from the petroleum age, each riddled with tunnels that flooded at high tide. A clever thief could drag crates out through the sludge without leaving wheel ruts. Ren produced an object I first took for a spool but realized was a snare microphone. When rotated, it mimicked the mating hum of female hikari mushi. He'd built it to test thorax resonance in larvae, but at full pitch, it could summon entire swarms. If we can find the right frequency, he said, we might lure the stolen colony out of hiding. And if the thief has caged them in iron? I asked. Hikari mushi cannot pass iron grills. The metal interferes with their internal magnetite and disorients them until they die. Then we smash the cages. We left at midnight, traveling by roof when possible, by sewer when the guards roamed. The municipal militia had orders to seize any unregistered insect breeder after last winter's plague, and we both carried crop knives, treated with anti-fungal oil. Those blades were not meant for soldiers, but you never know which mold lurks inside a horizontal cut. 3 hours later, we crouched behind a toppled billboard that advertised pre-section tablets, and beyond it, the husk of the Toyo Glass Cooperative. Here my father had apprenticed before the markets imploded. Steel rafters jutted like cannibal teeth above moon-slushed puddles. Below the rafters, light, faint, steady, unnatural in its stillness. We eased closer until the smell hit, not rot. Ether. They were anesthetizing the fireflies to keep them quiet. Do that more than a minute and you scramble their neural loops forever. Rin twitched. If they knock 'em out too long, I know. I squeezed his shoulder. The window nearest the ground had been patched with plastic film. Through it we saw cages, thousands stacked like honeycombs. In each, jar lids ripped away. Some insects still glowed, but weakly, their abdomens pulsing like hearts about to quit mid-beat. A walkway ran above the cages. On it stood a lean man in a university lab coat, hair silvered by dust. He held a data wand, scanning luminescence levels. 2 guards in mildewed body armor lounged by the frayed door, rifles slung low. Ren traced letters on my palm. B-E-N-I-A. I pointed left, where a row of tar-stained tents formed a makeshift barracks. We waited until a guard lit a cigarette, an indulgence so rare it marked shift change, and slipped through the window. Ether wrapped us in sweet ice. My skin tightened. One cage sat on a workbench, its lid off, a single bug crawling in circles. It was tagged with red wax. I recognized the pattern from Ren's box, a zigzag scored by a hairpin. Whoever branded that bug had done so many. Her hands shook, and the wax line quivered accordingly. I turned to the barracks, imagining rows of children gripping stylus and drip pot. Hot wire pliers in hand, Rin crept beneath the walkway. I followed, counting breaths. The silver-haired researcher murmured into a recorder. Specimen lot 37, down 30%. Dosage adjustment required. Additional feeders scheduled. Feeders. The word made my molars hum. Rin adjusted the microphone disc and gave me the angle. I flexed the copper mesh coil, charged it with static from the floor's iron grate, and nodded. He released the frequency. A sound like moon-stretched silk rippled through the building. All at once, thousands of bioluminescent heads snapped upward. The glow intensified, not white, not yellow, but the deep ghost green of new sea glass. The researcher jerked. What in? In that instant, the cages exploded with light. Dormant wings buzzed, antennae struck wire, hinges rattled. Fireflies swirled like a tidal bore, slamming into the padlocks. Fireflies swirled like a tidal bore slamming into the padlock. Some bent the thinner wires. Others slipped through screw holes widened by generations of rust. The two guards froze as emerald tornadoes battered their visors. They swore, swinging rifles like clubs. But when you face creatures too small to target and too many to dodge, panic trumps aim. I vaulted the rail, landing on the walkway. The researcher spun toward me, syringe in hand. I cracked the copper coil against his wrist. Out flew the syringe, clattering off scaffolding. "Portana, do you know what you've cost us?" he snarled. "About 100 million foot candles of hope," I spat back. He lunged, but Ren's microphone whined higher and every insect near us surged as one. The swarm lifted the man's coat edges, tangling his arms. A precise cloud veered to the ceiling, unscrewed a flood lamp bolt, and plunged the hall into near darkness, sparing only bug glow 1,000 small suns. Some cages remained locked. I wheeled toward them, but a sob in the barracks froze me. Ren heard it too. He dove through a flap. I vaulted over collapsed crates and followed. Inside, 4 cots ringed a kerosene stove. 3 were empty. On the 4th, a girl lay strapped wrist to ankle, tubes leaching clear fluid from her veins. Her breath rattled too loudly for her size. "Beanie," Ren whispered, cutting straps with frantic precision. Her eyes fluttered. "Rennie, hungry." I jabbed sugar gel from my medic pouch under her tongue. The color returned to her lips almost fast enough to mend my heart. Boots thumped behind us. The guards regrouped. I dragged the stove, tipped its fuel pot, and rolled it across the doorway. The petroleum hid sparks from a stray bullet, roaring into blue fire. Smoke curled, thick and choking, hiding us as we slipped Benny through a service hatch. But the researcher was not finished. We found him in the main hall, one arm knotted with fireflies, yet clinging to a detonator. 2 kegs of ammonium sat beside the freight door, wires snaking in. "Release me," he croaked, "or this whole nest burns." Ren edged closer. "You burn too. Evolution demands sacrifice." His thumb rested on the trigger. His coat twitched with dying insects, whose glow had dimmed to aching gray. I scanned the rafters. A pulley system held crates of cracked glass, the remains of the old cooperative's export inventory. "Ren," I whispered, "frequency shift. Now." He dialed. The microphone whistled at a pitch so shrill my teeth chattered. Free insects converged on the beam of sound, thousands clustering in a column that climbed the air like a helix. I sprinted up the maintenance ladder, reached the top fast enough that my lungs burned frost, and threw the lever. Crates rained. The researcher looked up. Horror spread across his face as 200 kilograms of defect panes shattered between him and the kegs. The blast shook the hall, but the detonator never found completion. Glass shards pinned his coat to the slats. Ren killed the frequency. Fireflies cascaded around us, reorganizing, rediscovering the freedom of random flight. Outside, dawn crept red above the warehouses. We bound the researcher, disarmed the kegs, and herded the captured insects toward open exit bays. As fresh air slipped in, the swarm flowed out, diffusing over the marsh like bioluminescent pollen. Once settled in the masty shed, the guards we locked in a storage kennel. The militia could sort them before breakfast. But hundreds of fireflies were too weak to fly. Their lights flickered like batteries left in winter. We piled them gently into jars, adding sugar dust and warm breath. Benny touched the glass. "Will they live?" "Some," I said. "If love crosses with science, and both behave." She nodded as though that bargain made sense. In post-Killian shutsuits. Japan, it was the only one that did. Ren and I spent the afternoon on the embankment, reinstalling survivors into lamps. Each jar we raised elicited cheers from neighbors leaning out balcony shutters. By sunset, the river glowed again, not as fierce as 3 nights before, but stronger than fear. The guild convened an emergency council after curfew. I recounted what happened. Ren provided technical logs saved from the researcher's wand. The elders voted to strip the Tokushima lab of charter and banned any bright overdrive experiments for 10 years. They also promoted Ren to journeyman lantern maker and appointed me head of a new stewardship. the Hope Keepers, guardians of the public light. Together we drafted 2 reforms. No single workshop would ever house more than a quarter of the district's larvae, and every lamp would bear an alarm needle. Remove the lid without a coded song, and a siren pierces the night. The first jar to receive the upgrade was the same one Wren had found in his box. We named those 7 fireflies the Chrysalis 7, because even with wax scars, they learned to shine again, albeit softer, as if reminding us that brilliance without temperance courts oblivion. On the eve of the hazy moon festival, Kanda gathered beneath lanterns we strung between the plum trees. People brought bowls of dumplings, radish pickles, and the last persimmons of autumn. I unveiled a new centerpiece, a tower of interlocking glass petals, each housing a microcolony distributed from the rescued brood. Thin water channels ran between petals so that when a breeze stirred, the whole structure chimed like rain striking shells. I invited Benny to ignite it. She raised a bamboo flute and played the 3-note scale Wren had woven to signal feeding time. At once, every firefly inside the tower expanded its glow to full amplitude. Light rippled up the petals, across the square, along the eaves, until even the lacquered bell of the distant shrine blushed green. Silence washed over the crowd, silence thick with wonder, not fear. Then applause broke like surf over breakwater, and I felt my father's spirit somewhere in the noise, proud that the guild still honored the fragile tether between glass and wing. Wren approached, wiping sweat and maybe a few secret tears. "You think they'll stay this bright?" "Only if we guard them together," I said. High above, the moon hung thin and restless, but our district outshone its melancholy. I realized then that the glow of a single jar can birth legends, but the glow of many jars, shared and safeguarded, can rebuild nations. The day the typhoon had ended, I stood at my workshop window, fearing the throat of darkness would close forever. Now, as children danced with handheld lamps and elders traced prayers and light upon the air, I understood something the collapse had nearly stolen. Hope is not a reservoir waiting to be emptied by thieves. Hope is migratory. Try to cage it and it will seek the crack in your prison wall. Set it free, and it circles back to those who lighted its first flight. I tucked an escaped firefly into my sleeve and let it crawl to the cuff. It glimmered once, twice, then leapt toward the tower, knowing where it belonged. And so did I.